Hello and welcome. Societies are built on a contract between citizens and their government, a contract that requires the government to safeguard security, promote welfare, and meet the needs of its people. Now, one of the clearest expressions of that contract is the national budget, the document that declares government priorities and sets the tone for the economy. Now, as we step into the year 2026, we turn our attention to the 2026 budget, the budget of consolidation. And we ask, what does it reveal about government's plans for Nigeria? What promises does it hold? And what challenges might it face? To help us unpack these questions and chart Nigeria's economic future, we're joined by development economist and policy analyst, Professor Ken Ife. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Prof. I want us to look at the year 2026, and would like to have your own opinions on how it looks. But before we go into the economic prospects for 2026, I'd like us to look back to the 2025 budget and its performance. If you look at it, how would you say it performed, looking at its revenue, income, and expenditure?
It has been suboptimal.
Okay.
And I think, in a way, the Ministry of Budget and National Planning owes a huge apology to the President, because the President has done so much to reform the economy. The economy that was on a sick bed, in intensive unit, at a cliff when he moved in, and suddenly have now come back in a recovery position. All macroeconomic indices are positive. It tells you how hard the central bank has been working. And some ministries and ministers are top-notch. That is where you have square peg in square hole. But there are areas where you have round peg in square hole. And that is why you are having this embarrassment. It's such an embarrassment entering into an election year. Now let's look at it. Budget and planning is actually a core macroeconomic view of our country. They drive the entire national planning, the economic planning, and forecasting and budgeting, and then carries the country where it has to be. But not when it's not working. When it is not working, it's disaster, because it's now what you would call a scramble, and it is where it has degenerated into. Now, let's take it one by one. There is a fiscal law that governs public finance management. And that fiscal law is Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007. Yes. The act is very, very detailed. It says you have to begin a process 4 months before the end of the period, which means by August, the budget circular is out. People begin their consultations, all that process starts coming in. And also, it requires that the performance reports on the budgets are done first quarter, second quarter. So they are looking at the performance as they are budgeting, third quarter. But when they haven't even got those reports, what are you going to be doing? It means that you are running a budget cycle where you are plugging figures and things from your head. You are not being guided by reality. Number two, you have to have a fiscal strategy paper.
Yes.
That fiscal strategy paper looks realistically to the future and then create benchmarks that connect to what the projections are. Mm-hmm. Now, what do we have? We have a fiscal strategy paper that recognizes that the forecast for crude, which is the primary item of our budget for revenue, that price will be between 65 and 68 over the 2024-2025. Mm-hmm. But what budget benchmark do you have? You have $75. And it has no connection with what has been projected by American Energy Institute for the period. And it was a conspiracy to go and have something higher than what is projected, because the normal thing is when you go below the projected, you have a small headroom.
Yes.
That goes to excess crude account, and it's part of our buffer. From excess crude account, you have accretion to reserves, foreign reserve, which is also another secondary buffer. These are the buffers that you use when the country comes under recession, under attack. because we have an import-dependent economy. Anything can happen to your economy any day. You wake up one morning, like what Trump did, the economy collapses. You use your buffers to fight. And then there may be an emergency, internal emergency. The God president wants to do something. He goes to the excess credit account and shares money to the governors to react to be able to do something. You haven't got any buffer. So you are vulnerable. Then, in the course of that too, when you take that headroom, when you move all that headroom and take a bogus figure, you are inviting chaos because you are now sending a signal that we're never going to have enough money to do this. So people are going to be scrambling. And you know that it is the presidency, those are the bills that get paid. And in an election year, it will be crisis because nothing will be paid except what is political for election. So you will now know what you have experienced last month is nothing compared to what's going to happen in the next 6 to 9 months. It will be absolute chaos, dog eat dog.
Despite the president.
You haven't seen anything yet. We're going to discuss the detail. So what then happened was that you also created a bogus room for borrowing. But then the borrowing was not realistic because we have worked over the years to come to 50% domestic and external borrowing. But here you have 65% domestic borrowing. I want to tell you what that means. Central Bank has withdrawn from domestic finance intervention for good reasons because they're doing price discovery, they're trying to stabilize that foreign external sector and others, and they're doing a fantastic job. So we can excuse them because they came in to meet 33 trillion naira ways and means printed, which is inflation. They're going to suck out that oxygen from our economy. So you can excuse them. But then, for you to come and then also, you notice that they raised the bank's CRR, cash reserve ratio, from 50% from 30 to 50. And then the liquidity ratio is still at 30. So 80% of banks' money, if you put 1,800, is sequestered because you're going to hit there, the other one is sucked out. So they only have 20%. And then the central bank comes back to them and sells a full market operation to them and take all. So they don't even have any money to lend to you. And then the MPR rate, which is the minimum base rate, is 27.5, 27. That means for them to even lend, it will be about 35 or more.
So it's unrealistic to expect
that the private sector will be able to. So private sector cannot get intervention money anymore at 10%, and they cannot borrow because the grant doesn't even have anything to lend to them. All that they are doing is they now take anything they see and go and buy treasury bills to scamper up to safety. And so when we are now beginning to focus on domestic borrowing, you're actually taking the money left to the private sector. So they can't invest. So it's a double tragedy for the private sector. What you are doing is that they are destroying the whole economy just by what you have done. Then the second point is about that excess borrowing. We will interrogate the quality of the borrowing because that is another minefield, the quality of that borrowing. Now, let's go to the law. The law also says that in the course of your medium-term expenditure framework, which is how you now project for 3 years, a rolling plan, you create debt. How does the law allow you to create debt? The law says you can borrow money. Because America is the richest country in the world, but they are the biggest. They know what America owns? GDP $26 trillion. Their world trade $33 trillion. America owns $34 trillion. That's what they are owing. They are the richest, but they own the most. So leverage, you borrow money to leverage development. But you do it on the back of productive activity, infrastructure and productive activity that are capable of repaying the money so you can borrow more. You free, repay, and borrow more. That's the spirit of the law. So the law says, yes, you can borrow, but that borrowing has to be for long term, which we also know to be 10 to 30 years or something, for good reason. On concessionary rates, which is also believed to be less than 3% or 2%. Sometimes you can get 40-year loan at 0%. Yeah, from multilateral lenders. So for the 9%. But that's not what we are doing. Then it also says it has to be the eligibility condition. It has to be for capital expenditure and human resource development. Now, what is capital expenditure? Capital expenditure is infrastructure, but it has to be economic infrastructure. If you decide to build any road that leads to your village, that doesn't connect to any economic center, it's not economic. When the law says, I'll come back to it because there's another thing, the condition that connects to it. Then human resource development is education, health, entrepreneurship, and employment. Now, when the law also says there has to be cost-benefit analysis. Now, when you bring cost-benefit analysis and economic investment, that's economic infrastructure and productive activity, what that law says to you is that they want you in framing a need to borrow money to have consideration for economic corridors, industrial corridors, commercial corridors, residential corridors. So if you are building highway, you are building rail, you are building ICT infrastructure, you go through those corridors so they can have maximum usage and you can generate the revenue to repay the loan. So like if you want to do things, something to go to your village, or you want to do something to go to a minister's village that doesn't have economic value, use the money in your revenue, internally generated revenue.
So like the Lagos Calabar highway, we could have used or we can use.
You see, we have revenue. So we collected 26 trillion. Use the money. You see, if you are going to, and also the law, because the law does not allow you to borrow to disburse, it doesn't allow you to borrow for recurrent expenditure. You cannot borrow to pay salary. You cannot borrow money and then go and use it to do conditional cash transfer, pay people. The law does not allow you to do that. If you want to do that, just go, and it is good that you do that. But use your internally generated revenue. I have said that many times to World Bank, you cannot borrow money to Nigeria to disburse for that purpose, because if you look at section 41 of the law, it says any lending outside this framework is unlawful. So in the third quarter report of World Bank, they recognize that there is a need to focus on food security and then do more social security, but use your internally generated revenue. So I became so happy that World Bank has eventually accepted that that's the principle.
Okay, so you know what we're doing now is we're still trying to look at how 2025 worked.
Yeah.
So in terms of from your outlook, we didn't meet our revenue.
No, we didn't meet
because of some of this what do you call it? The figures we had.
Yeah, it was scandalous.
Good.
And let me explain that a bit more, because what you have done is, this is the conspiratorial part of it. You know that on one hand, your borrowing is disturbing and sucking out money from the private sector, okay? But on the other hand, you created a scramble. Because if you look at the pecking order in payment in disbursement, first line charge is debt, external debt servicing. Okay. That money goes out. If you don't, all the rating agencies will come down to you like a ton of bricks. Second, are salaries of staff. If you don't, they will be out on the street. Maybe pension, then security and defense. Are you not going to pay? More people will be kidnapped. But then, you would have paid, by December, you would have paid 100% of all the recurrent expenditure. True. And maybe a tiny something on capital. So the conspiracy is against capital expenditure. So they now push it to March, push it to June, push it to December. You still haven't spent the capital. And it's because you over-bloated the budget. So all other things take precedence over capital. And then look into the injustice. The injustice is that the government employs less than 10% of the population are involved in government, and they're sharing 90% of our wealth. Is that 30% on capital? That's where the whole population get looking into budget. That's where we get capital expenditure. That's where we create jobs, and we shove it by the side. Is it fair? The scramble is about recurrent expenditure, capital salaries, all that stuff. Where are the people that generate the wealth? But they're not getting anything.
But last year, I think I remember the president said we had met for the third quarter.
No, but it was later cancelled because the minister says different thing. The president says something. It was ill-advised.
Oh.
The fact of the matter is that we didn't meet our funding budget. We didn't meet it. So money wasn't available. So now you have some carryovers of 2023. You have the whole of the capital of 2024 shoved in to 2025. And then you entered to the December of 2025. You haven't even started the capital of 2025. So how are you going to do 2026? So they have to go and revoke the law because it's an appropriation law. The law is appropriation. Yes, yeah. They have to revoke that and they re-enact a combined one for 25, and then begin to look for the future. So that's not easy necessarily. This has taken us 10 years back in budget and plan. When you have law, the reason is that they refuse to look at the law that governs budgeting that governs fiscal planning.
And that's why you place it.
That's why we are in this mess.
That's why you place.
Don't blame Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance is doing what he's asked to do. Because he brings in a budget that doesn't make sense, and then somebody is breathing down his neck. Pay this, pay this, pay this. So leave him alone. Who originated that budget that is causing all this confusion?
Now, if I was to ask you, we've now looked at some of the problems arising from 2025. Does it look like we're better with the way we plan 2026?
It's going to be worse.
Oh.
Let me tell you why it's going to be worse. We were dealing with price of around $68 compared to 75, which is only, how many? 7% headroom. Mm-hmm. Here, Senate said go to $60. And then the planning is still insisting we should go high to try, and eventually they ended at 64.8. Right. The projections are 52 to 58, but we know that with Trump coming in now, the excess supply of crude is 4 million barrels a day, excess. He's going to pump out crude. The crude excess will go to up to 10 million barrels a day. The price will go down below 50. It will go down below $50 and will stay there for some time. Now, let's look at the gap between 50 and 64.5. That is 15% drop compared to the 7 you had the other time.
Which we could do.
Now, let me tell you the problem. The problem is that in the regime of last year, you were still getting some revenue from crude. Mm-hmm. Today, you will not get any revenue from crude because Nigeria can only balance their budget when you are earning between $60 to $70. Once it hits 50, Nigeria is a high-cost producer. You haven't got anything to come to you. You won't get the revenue from crude.
But we're told that non-oil is increasing.
What is non-oil? What percentage? It's so small. But now look at the refining, which is the area you can make money. Now we have refining sovereignty because Dangote graciously, God graciously have brought Dangote in. And look at the capacities coming out in refining. He's doing 700,000 barrels. He's going to do 1.4 million barrels. Bua is doing 200,000 barrels. $50 billion investment is going in Ondo in refining. More guys are coming in Lagos with more refinery. 3 modular refineries. Nigeria will become a refining hub. And government will see revenue. So that's how we are going to escape recession from this thing Trump is doing. So that's the only way you can.
So we won't depend on the outside. Yeah, we might not even sell outside.
You don't need to sell outside. Let me tell you, because if you add the capacities, 500,000 barrels, 200,000 barrels, 1.4 million barrels, our production will not meet it. So why are you worrying about this? You just have to invest more and more on opening more field to even meet domestic demand. PIA says domestic demand first. That is the meaning of domestic crude obligation. And so I keep saying to the president, if they are not giving, nobody can explain to me why Dangote that has 700,000 barrels a day, but you are giving 70,000. So where is the other 600,000 barrels? If you can't give it to him, then government collect tax 5% on that upstream domestic crude that are exporting instead of giving it to local. Charge the tax percent. Get 5% tax in dollar so that you can use to fund your budget.
Get the tax
from upstream that should supply that crude.
Okay.
It's legitimate. That's the same way as you are putting 15% ad valorem tax on imported petrol. But there's no reason to import that because it's cutting it below, trying to destroy the industrial refining capacity and deliver substandard crude. So it's legitimate to put that. I've defended this based on WTO, ECOWAS. I've looked at all the international laws to support what the president has done. So we have a leeway.
Yes, you were trying to say.
If you don't do this,
so we can get some money from.
Of course, that is where you will get. Okay, let me give you a sound bite for the money.
Yes.
Dangote, at the moment, capital market has hit 100
trillion.
Yes,
1 trillion.
And once Dangote moves in, it will go to over 200 trillion. All right. Dangote is planning 100 billion in dollar in revenue. That will make him among the next 10 biggest 100. Then in terms of capitalization, he's looking at $200 billion. And then in terms of revenue, just 2 items alone, polypropylene and the fertilizer, is giving $6.4 billion. Nigerian government can earn money. If only you can just focus on making sure that you start refining, not allowing killing of 4 refineries, paying for people who are working there and not producing anything, and then all the shenanigans, anything you can think of is going on there. You've killed the economy.
But when you say we can invest in refinery, are you talking for us to
government to put a penny in refinery because they've killed the whole business? They don't put a penny. They should sell that thing. Why are you selling petrol when you don't produce petrol? What is NNPC doing there? Sell that thing to the unions. Let them go and run the petrol stations. Why are you coding refinery? You've sucked away 10 plus 3.5, $13.5 billion from government money, using it to repair the refinery that has not worked. Sell it, dash it. Don't even say, don't give it to the unions or you let them go and do it. Let them go and pay for it. Stop draining government people's money. And all of this come on the back of import dependence, because you need to understand the underlying politics. In 1945, the war, they agreed that we should be producer of raw material, International Division of Labor, and that the West will reform them and bring it to us to consume.
Who agreed that?
Oh, really?
I don't
know people have the story. The EU, a partnership agreement that they brought to Nigeria to sign, which all of the African countries signed, says we want 80% of your import market. Mm-hmm. Europe wants 80% of our import. Europe doesn't expect us to do business with Africa, to do with Japan, China, India, Brazil, if they want 80%. Apart from, we want all your raw materials, and then they will give you refined product to consume. Mm-hmm. Can I explain to you? This is a value chain. Nigeria, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire produce 74% of world cocoa. But when you look at the cocoa value chain, we only occupy 7%. What that tells you, you can look at soya beans, you can look at all other products. The value chain, 10% to 15% is the margin your raw material can command. And then you now go back to consume finished product where you are going to find 100% to buy it. The people that make money are the people that are processing and adding value to these products. So when you export your raw material, you're exporting your jobs and importing poverty. And when you don't assert yourself in the value chain, then you will be poor forever. What will happen is that you now go and borrow money from them to come and consume the product they sent to you. You will never come out of that debt. So your biggest problem, Lanre, is to deal with import dependence. And it's because you are not squaring up to deal with it. That is why you have a glorious picture of all the macroeconomic indicators, positive and convergent, exchange rate, very high forex reserves, foreign trade balance positive, balance of payment positive, anything, inflation dropping, GDP growth rate 4%, all of that beautiful picture, but poverty is worsening, unemployment is worsening, and there's nothing, there's a disconnect with the reality on the ground. Has been a reason. The reason is import dependence.
But you know why I'm surprised?
You have to tackle that.
But the government is saying they are that export has gone up.
What are you exporting? If you export raw material,
so it doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
You are now talking
Let me explain to you.
Add the value.
Let me explain to you. Both Senate and Federal House of Rep, they passed a bill for 30% mandatory value addition on our raw materials. And that bill is with the president for accent for more than 6 months. And I just want the president to give accent, because once you pass that bill, at least the crude being lifted inland can actually go to our refinery to refine. Maybe you just exempt the offshore for now. Okay? That's the practical implication. Then the practical implication is that if you're looking for foreign direct investment to come into the area of raw material, they will never come. Why would they come? You bring equipment here to process raw material and they're exporting that raw material. So why are they going to bring the equipment here?
And so what should
it's
be
only
done?
Domestic investors that will be investing.
So government has to encourage.
Government must implement that 30% value addition so that at least, even if you're not implementing 100%, 30% will give you 30% more value in what you are going to get.
I wanted you to look at the issue of the Nigeria First policy. It was something that a lot of people looked at to address, and like you said, it ties in with that 30% thing. But there were other parts of it that said, when we want to get something, we would look at things produced in the country first.
Well, we said, eat what you produce and produce what you eat. It's not just about eating. Use what you produce, including other things, many other things. There are many other things. And that is a coherent Nigerian first policy. But also, it also means that government should procure locally. Because local procurement is very important for them to support economic growth. If Nigerian government is buying the cars assembled in Nigeria, can you imagine how many hundreds of billions of naira those manufacturers will get?
And they turn the money.
And they look at 400,000 cars, second-hand cars coming to Nigeria from Kutun. If it costs only $10,000 for each, that is $4 billion. If $4 billion become available to people assembling cars in Nigeria, they will do better. And this was why I thought that when the president made a speech in end of May 2023, he talked about no more subsidy. Then he said, we're going to unify the rates. But he also talked about consumer credit. And so I quickly, the National Planning PAMSEC said to me, please get us a proposal on that. I did a proposal, quick one, then also on oxygen economy, hydrogen economy. I did all that and gave to them. The focus was, look, since CBN is withdrawing from innovation, get money to the manufacturer, because Nigerians are buying 100%. You want to buy a car 100%. You have to buy 100%. So direct that credit to the manufacturers so that the people can walk in, pay 20% of a car and drive up the car. Next year, you bring it back, it becomes second-hand, and you drive off another one. As long as you have 3 years to repay or 5 years. Do you understand? That's how you stimulate the economy.
But that has been done.
No, that's not what they did. That's not what they did. They went and first of all, to get more civil servants to borrow money on that credit. I said, that's not what we're talking about. You are fueling more inflation because you are pushing money to consumption side of the country rather than the production. You direct resources to production. If you are going to give subsidy, direct it to production, not to consumption. That's what people do if you are thinking about creating employment and delivering dividend. So that's not what it is. And then, of course, frontally on the Nigerian First policy is how do you look at what God has given to you and add value to them in a way that you remove import dependency and achieve export promotion. In other words, the strategy that you need is an export-led strategy, export growth-led strategy. It is export growth-led strategy that took 400 million people out of poverty in China, that took away over 200 million out of poverty from Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, and all these small countries. That is the strategy that took it away. So it's not just produce what you have for your own consumption. You also have to target export so that they can generate forex revenue. Do you understand? As well as contain the import dependence and create the jobs in the country. Because that is where the jobs get created. And then deal with the basic needs. Because the basic need of food, you cannot deal with it unless you adopt the strategy we are discussing. Now, service sector is driving the growth. Thank goodness. Because service sector is about 15% of our GDP. But then, we also have some growth in crude production that was 20%, second and then 5%, but it's only 4.4% of the GDP in terms of the contribution. So important as it is only that. It's only in the external sector that makes a huge difference because it's dollar. 90% of our dollar requirement comes from crude and gas. 79% from crude, 11% from gas. So the issue is that we need to make sure that we are not being blinded by the growth figures coming from services. Banking and currency, banking will not give you food. Neither will ICT, telephone call, give you the food you want to eat. Nor the job give you the jobs. The kind of jobs you need are not from there. The jobs are from the real sector. Do you understand? This is why your growth is not generating jobs. The jobs are disappearing when your growth is showing positive. And poverty is widening to 139, from 133 million to 139 million. It's getting worse because that is the disconnect. The disconnect is that you are not focusing on the rural sector, you are not focusing on capital goods, you are not focusing on removing the dependency, you are not focusing on adding value to what God has given you as a way of moving forward. You are not, so that's why you are suffering more.
Let me have your opinion on the social safety net, because I remember you mentioned it earlier. One of the things the World Bank and other industries had done was to say that, look, make sure while you're doing the reforms, you're also putting some things for the people that are.
There are definitely a lot of less privileged people in our community, without a doubt.
Yes.
And in economic development, you have two-way traffic. You have focusing on entrepreneurship and capital development to actually drive growth. But at the same time, you cannot forget those who are very disadvantaged. So you have to handle those on the slow lane. So that's where you bring that. But it's not just about distributing money, because that doesn't create wealth. You need to create wealth with them by giving them the seeds to plant, giving them fertilizer to plant, so that they will have a dividend. And then you nurture them to grow, rather than hand out. How many people are you going to give hand out? 230 million. That's not going to work. But you still do something, because there are those 10,000 naira means a lot. They can even survive on 10,000 naira because they are just on the ground. So that has to come from your internally generated revenue. You do not borrow. The law does not allow you to borrow money to disburse for that purpose. Use your internally generated revenue. Use any grants given to you by World Bank. Share all those. But focus on building wealth rather than sharing resources. So that's the disconnect there.
Let me take you up on the issue of our debt servicing, the amount. What's your take on that?
Well, the thing is this. I feel that based on the macroeconomic parameters,
yes,
we have our debt to GDP ratio has come down from sometime around 60% now to about something below to 40%. So it's much less than 40%. So on paper, we can actually borrow more money. We can.
Okay.
But then it's not the GDP that pays the debt. What pays the debt is the service.
Yes.
Is the debt service. So that's where you now come and look at the debt service to revenue. And the debt service to revenue used to be 98%. Now it's come down to 70, down to 60 something. So that debt service to revenue is coming down. So which means that the window is realistic to be able to repay. But you could be better, it could be faster, it could be more if you can borrow for the right purpose. As I have told you, the borrowing is not following the law. The law is very explicit. We have the second best fiscal law in the world after Brazil. But the people in that budget, they are not looking at that law, because the law was it was when Okonjo-Iweala and Obasanjo were here. It just sorted it out. There are many provisions of it. If we have time, I can tell you that they pushed aside. But still, on the basis of what is left, you can run an economy that is very efficient.
So our problem is that we're not following.
They're not even looking at it. Because if you are borrowing for the right purpose and generating wealth from doing that, then you can repay. No one will pay IMF loan in one bullet payment. But you could do that. Instead, what you are doing is you're actually doing worse thing than the law actually says. You go and borrow Eurobond for 1 year, maybe 2 years, at 10%. Short-term borrowing, not long-term.
Long-term.
10%, not transactionary. You are borrowing, that's what I use to repay the dollar-denominated loan. Come on, how can you do that? But if you have investments that are capable of generating, they will pay you, then you ask them to bring more, you borrow more. Can you imagine? You decided to borrow $21.5 billion, 15 billion yen, 2.198 billion euro. You can borrow double that amount, but follow the law. They're not looking at the law. The law requires that you have to subject those to those tests. The tests that they are for that purpose, they need eligibility condition, and that you will have a good view of the cost-benefit analysis to be sure that it's productive, and that you enter into the borrowing plan, and then it comes that no process, fast track, bam, then it's going to to assembly to approve. Why circumvent the law when the law would even ask you to borrow more, but for the right purpose?
So we need to get that right this year.
They don't want to know. But that is where the trouble, that is the kernel. And it's unfortunate because all of these things that are going on, the president doesn't need these things. The president is somebody who has made his money legitimately and who has worked very hard, but he's going to be let down by this shenanigans going on. He doesn't need this. When the law allows you to take more, but just follow, subject it to rules. And then you're going to have a situation where there will be a challenge on the integrity of the loans taken from the World Bank because those loans they are not compliant to the law. And the law says
that could be a problem.
Of course, it's going to be a serious problem. Because I wrote a petition in 2008 to Tony Blair when Nigeria was facing $18 billion rebate on their loan. I wrote a petition to him. I said, and I argued these points about the integrity of the loan taken from World Bank, that people collected $68 million dollar, and the road was never there, the hospital was not there, and all that. Nigeria wrote. He sent it to the Quali Club. The Quali Club released us. There are other people present, but I remember that. Why circumvent? Why create problems that will affect the president's second?
This issue reminds me that one of the things that the president did when they set up the performance evaluation.
The beautiful thing they called out some ministers, and also a lot of women ministers left because they called them out. But now you see it working. It's just like a policeman stopping you on the road and you come out and have a chat with him, settle the policeman. That's it. No, but they gave us hope that we are going to see square peg in square hole.
Yes.
And then we're not asking the president to throw people away from cabinet, put the right people where they belong. That's what they call square hole, square peg in square hole.
And you said he has done that for some.
For some. For example, look at health. You can't get a better minister than Minister for Health right now. When Donald Trump is breathing fire on Nigeria, and on the other hand, they are doing deal $5 billion with Nigeria to put $2 billion. Is that not confidence? He has taken $1.57 billion loan from World Bank to sort out the health indicators so that we can see performance indicator and others. You've seen that. Then you've seen the education man going up and down, delivering on education. You've seen the student loan. You've seen him come to Dangote to persuade him to do $1 trillion scholarship, and he now came there around the policies of government and around the strategy, gave marching order to his ministries to work with them. Come on, many things are working. So there's too many that are working. But then there are areas where you have so much problem and nothing gets saved. You cannot have sacred cow in positions where you need to have delivery. Put people elsewhere, send people as ambassadors to somewhere, send them as liaison persons to the assembly, and there are places to put people. Get young people who have the energy, because you need energy, integrity, and expertise, conception, competence. You need those three. Okay, so you can have public trust.
Now, looking at you've looked at a lot of the internal factors that could affect the year going forward. What do you think are some of the external that we need to be careful about?
Now, I'm trying to be brief. There is a background, what we call the geopolitics. The geopolitics was in 1935, you had the Depression. The Depression was simply because American farmers said, no, we're having too much from Europe. They put 6% tariff, and the result was counter-war, that the world went into depression. Then you have in 1945, after the Marshall Plan, you saw what happens. America built this institution, Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, Marshall Plan for Europe, this, that, and that. Then you also have, as a part of it, dollarization became the central point for trade and this thing. But it came under challenge in 1974 when OPEC came out. And seeing that the American Secretary of State was threatening war and all that, but eventually they settled for Euro petrodollar. So Saudi Arabia, all those Gulf states, we will give you protection as long as crude are sold and bought in dollar. So that sort of settled that. Then now, you will now have a situation where in late 60s, they abrogated the gold standard and then focused on dollar. Nobody could seriously fight that back. But then it now became a problem because fast forward, not only that we have coerced people into dollar, standard. They are now using people, forcing them to come to reserves in dollar, and then when they have problems, you seize their money, like what happened with Russia in Ukraine. Over $300 billion was seized, and some of it are being used to fund Ukraine to fight Russia. And they think it's going to go? It's not going to go. Then you come to the energy side of it. In 1991 or 92, America and NATO, they persuaded Russia, USSR, to release those countries and support the reunification of East and West Germany. So they were occupying East Germany, America was occupying West. They allowed it. And under that agreement, they said those countries NATO will not advance towards Russia. But no sooner than they did that, than they admitted a lot of them into NATO and they moved forward. But when they now came to Ukraine, Russia says enough is enough. And then in 2014, Ukraine made a silly statement that Black Sea, which is Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey, that they could block Russia from there. Russia moved in immediately and took over Crimea. You can't do that.
How does that affect us?
You are threatening. You are threatening that you join NATO. If you are going to join NATO, we invaded. Now, when they have invaded, the way all this thing come to is that Trump now came back. Trump is a strong admirer of Putin. You won't see him criticize Putin for invading Crimea or attacking that. He wants the solid mineral, the rare earth mineral in Ukraine, and he wants to stop the bloodshed. That's what his interest. But he was going to do exactly what Putin is doing, which is what he has done in Venezuela. And he's going to do in Colombia, in Mexico, in Greenland. That is abandoning. And we saw yesterday. Yesterday now they are withdrawing from over 60 organizations, international organizations, US. They are withdrawing from all of. So we've abandoned that international order. WTO, all the stuff that is abandoning them is now brute force. How does that come? How it affects you is that crude is now in the witness stand. Now, as they pump that crude, price will crash below $50. And then also the refining capacities in America in the coastal are going to be taking the heavy crude. So you're going to see more countries now blending light crude with heavy crude. And everybody is doing that now. So our revenue based on that is going to go. But there's a bigger geopolitics beyond that, because you will now find that Nigeria is one of the three countries, Saudi Arabia, they are moving to BRICS axis where they are going to trade crude in currencies other than dollar. And America doesn't like to hear that.
Yes.
But that is another thing in the pipeline. Do you understand? So this is the beginning. But there's going to be more shocks. And fortunately, they are also here helping us on defense, but keeping an eye on what we are doing. They were very angry because in 2018, IMF admitted China in the basket of currencies. And as soon as they did that, many countries adopted yuan as part of their basket. Nigeria took 5%. And then we went beyond that to do swap. And America was angry because that was a big signal that we are moving away from dollar. Do you understand? The fact is that America owes the whole world so much money, and they are never going to repay the debt. They will only print more dollars.
Where do you think Nigeria? How do you think Nigeria should balance the play now?
The thing is this: I'm not going to tell Nigeria to stop doing business with China and all those. You have to. Saudi Arabia, that is the most religiously bound to. They're not going to Pakistan for nuclear shield.
So Nigeria should continue trying.
Nigeria has to continue to see what India did. India is the country Nigeria should follow as a model. Because India has successfully navigated the hostility against Russia doesn't apply to India. They now transferred military security hostility to China economic hostility. But India is in the middle, growing very fast, but not in any of those ends. But all of them are in the same boat, that they are all walking away from dollar-denominated economy to one where it is gold and tangibles and stuff like that. And that is the way to go.
Very quickly, because of time, I would like you to talk to us. One thing that makes this year unique is the new tax law, the tax reform laws. How do you see that affecting the country?
It's a great opportunity because you are dealing with anachronistic law that was taxing wealth and taxing investment and even taxing poverty. and you have 62 laws, only 5 of them we are giving you 95% of your revenue, 6 of them we are giving you. So what are you doing with all those? They are just red tape and blockage stopping private sector from end. And then you have people on the ground that get very little money. It's called $70 minimum, $70,000. But they can't buy anything with it. 70% of what they spend on that money is just food. Remove VAT. So you remove all the VATs on food and transport and in education and all that. And when you have dealt with that majority of our population, they are having more disposable income and they can buy more. And that means aggregate demand will go up, GDP will go up. And then you turn to the MSMEs, 42 million. And then you now move their threshold from 25 to 50 million, enabling them to have more of their money. They will sack more workers, they will employ more, they will produce more, and then aggregate output will go up, GDP will go up.
So it's a good plan.
Then it is good, but they should allow it to work.
Okay.
But don't forget that the devil is always in the implement. And then you come to the oil by bringing the Nigerian Revenue Service to consolidate the oil mining thing, because money was being paid to any PRC, someone being paid to any. No, now it's one person getting that money. So all those leakages is easier to track because it's one person. Do you understand?
Let me take you up on, you remember you said something. VAT has been removed for food, has been removed for transport and things. That should ordinarily lead to lower prices in that.
There's what you call lag. Lag. Okay, that was removed reduced price of petrol, gantry 6.99 and then 7.43. Then you still have people who are trying to. He's got it in many of the MRS stations and all that, but there were still people who are still charging. It takes a little while. They were saying it's charging 900. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Despite the 600
I know. So you have all that. It takes time. It takes a little while to set in. Because we have an economy that is ruled by speculation. It's speculation that is causing a lot of this anticipation and hoarding of things and all those behavior.
Yeah, but shouldn't government take a part to help make sure things work the way? Why will I take a policy to help bring down price, and people are taking advantage of it, hoarding, still increasing price, and then we'll sit down and say we're running an economy that we don't want to interfere with?
I hear you. Have they done the performance evaluation they said they are going to do? They did it a little and then they see what was going on. A lot of things. The devil is in implementation.
Okay, so let's end with this. You have the opportunity to talk to the president. What are three things you advise briefly?
If you want to connect the growth in the economy to the reality of deprivation worsening, then focus on import dependency, dealing with that. And the key to it is to have export-led growth strategy that connects value addition of what you have to what they are exporting. And then make sure that line, that 30% value addition gives a floor to the manufacturing sector so that you can get a realistic, this is where you will tackle unemployment, and poverty. That's where you're going to tackle.
So he should sign that.
Yeah, that is the only thing. He hasn't signed it yet.
So he should sign it.
He should sign it. Because that is where you create that pathway for realistic and inclusive growth. Otherwise, we will all be cheering you and saying, oh, wonderful paper, 4.5% growth. It's actually 5%. But the figures from the other side will cast a dark shadow on everything that's being done.
So, sir, I would like to thank you very much for the time and for your ideas and some of the things you've put forward. We're very grateful.
Pleasure.
Now, as we conclude tonight's conversation, one thing is very clear. The budget must be closely monitored and reviewed where necessary and implemented as planned. Last year's performance fell short of expectations, but this year, especially as it is an election year, getting it right is critical. For citizens, the expectation is simple, that policy and execution align to deliver real impact in their daily lives. Well, thank you for being part of this important discussion. But remember, the discussion doesn't end here. We want to hear your views, your reactions, and your questions. You can connect with us on all or any of our social media platforms and send us an email. And if you missed any part of tonight's program, or would like to revisit previous episodes, head over to our YouTube channel, simply search for Newsnight, click on the playlist and catch up on the episodes you want. Thank you once again for being there and for being an essential part of the conversation. Until we meet again, stay safe and stay informed.